Welcome, Ellin Sidell. How are you?
I am doing fantastic and I'm pumped to be on your podcast.
Very excited to have you. Are you ready to pour into our listeners?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, Ellen, would you share your leadership journey and tell us what you're doing now?
Absolutely. It's kind of a funny thing because, if I go back to childhood, I didn't realize even until a few weeks ago, because I've been doing some podcasts because my book is out this year, which is kind of exciting. We'll get to that later. But I've been doing some reflecting, and it turns out that I never used this, but both my parents were neurodiverse. That kind of had an impact on me that I didn't really fully, it's always sort of unfolding each day. Somehow we get smarter or have more awareness. So I would say my leadership journey started even when I was like 7, helping my mom and my dad. I was the oldest of 3 girls. My dad was in cybersecurity before they even called it that. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she later in life had to create a career for herself. So that's kind of the leadership journey there, being the oldest and taking care of my kid sisters. And I flashed forward to my first job in corporate after getting my degree. And I was a supervisor within 6 months, and I had no idea what I was doing. I'm like, kind of like years later when I had the baby, they don't hand you the manual on how to raise a baby, to get to teenagedom. Well, they don't really tell new supervisors, like, what is leadership? How do you do this thing? And I was the supervisor of a former best friend. So it got kind of messy. So I'm still kind of helping that 20 something. I really want to pour into managers and supervisors who find themselves in this role going, okay, now what? Anyway, I had like over 30 years in corporate America. The last 25, I worked at kind of amazing companies, Nestlé, Microsoft for 16 years, and Costco for nearly 9. And a funny thing happened in my Costco journey. And, my whole background is IT and supply chain. I was a manager for nearly half my career. And I realized that I was hungry to learn more. And so there had been a mentorship program, and I jumped in and got in. And then some of the leaders at Costco were saying, isn't it great that you're meeting your peers? But the format was such that it really wasn't conducive to meeting people, kind of the awkward food, 20 minutes beforehand. I'd sit down, I'd listen to an amazing presentation by these leaders who were really trying to teach the Costco culture, which was very amazing. However, I wasn't meeting my peers. So I said, but I know it will work. Because when I was at Microsoft, I had been a co-mentor in a ring, which was 12 to 18 people at once. And so I said, hey, can I volunteer to create a mentoring program? Because the current program was turning down 30 to 40 people every year because they were accepting 30, but there was anywhere between 30 and 40 more people that wanted to join, and they didn't have the bandwidth because it was all volunteer.
Wait, that's a big accomplishment. And I love that you saw that opportunity because that doesn't happen often where people are knocking at the door to learn.
Yeah. I didn't stop there though. And I do talk a little bit about this in my book because my book it's called The Influence Advantage. And it's about how you can use behavioral science on purpose to get ethical yeses. And what I mean by that is when we're in a business, we want yes to more clients. And it's always ethical if we want a win-win, right? We're helping them. We want to serve them with what our skills are. Well, in companies, it could be all sorts of yeses, like I'd like a promotion because I believe I've proven my responsibility, my ability to take on new projects and deliver on time. So the bottom line is there's all sorts of yeses. So in this situation, I had to get a yes and a sponsorship. Sponsorship is super important for anybody in corporate, really in any career. If you can get a sponsor, you have some gold behind you. And what that means is someone who has access to a room you don't have, put their political capital on the line for your behalf, whether it's a direct promotion, whether it's a stretch assignment, whether it's exposure to other people in the organization. So I got a sponsor and she said, fine, Ellen, because I'm kind of like a dog with a bone. People like the idea of mentorship. So it wasn't a hard sell. I would mention that and the people like, oh, I'll volunteer. So we had like a complete volunteer group doing it. And we had 2 rings and 17 people in the first year. And it grew very organically through word of mouth. And we had over 200 people graduate in 5 years. And I became as networked in the company as all my friends that had 30 and 40 years. Because every time I saw a VP, I'm like, ooh, they could be a possible mentor. I'm doing my sales pitch on them. But like my soul came alive. And while I'm doing all this, I'm teaching VPs how to be mentors. leadership trainer, I was doing career coaching for my peers, even though at that point I had off ramped for management. And so I thought, wow, this is kind of interesting. And it sort of became a calling.
One of the things that comes to mind as you tell your story is you really understand the value and the skills of a great leader if they can lead volunteers.
Well, that is true. I mean, talk about like buying into the mission, though. That's absolutely essential.
So high level skills there. Thank you so much. Now, where can we get more information about the important work that you do?
Feel free to go to my website, ellinsidell.com, or if you do ellinsidell/book, you can see my book, The Influence Advantage. And in there, there's 6 of us, and we talk from kind of different perspectives about our journeys and how influence has made a huge advantage in our careers and our lives.
Love it. Very important work. Thank you so much. Now, as leaders, we often face significant changes, challenges, right? I mean, you and I know what that is. What has been the best crisis in your life and why?
Well, it was probably my medical crisis. I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 39, and I ended up having it 3 times. I laugh because I tell people I won a cancer contest. What that was a bunch of hospitals and the local Como TV in Seattle market all got together. And this is in the early days. People weren't always doing videos back in the 2010. And I won. And the second prize was I got to cut an ad that was shown in the local Seattle market. Over 80,000 people saw my 30-second ad for early detection. And I laugh because I tell people some people get 15 minutes of fame, but I only got 30 seconds. But here's the thing, when you're trying to get a message out and you have 30 seconds, boy, you really got to distill that message. And part of my journey was realizing that during my cancer journey, I had subconsciously made myself smaller than the cancer. Like imagine just a picture, like Ellen and a big C. And Ellen's really tiny and the big C. And so I wanted to get the message that we are, as humans, unique and beautiful and dynamic. And we're so much bigger than just that static picture of when they told us we had cancer.
Wow. That's a supremely important message, Ellen. When did you realize that?
When I was preparing, putting the ad together, and we all go through what I call it the school of hard knocks. And it could be life-altering things, but I just feel like, hey, we've all had bad things happen and we pick ourselves up by our bootstraps and we learn. So I was like, well, what could I learn from this situation? And trying to learn about something subconscious, something so deeply held, you don't really learn it. It becomes revealed. And I don't know how it happens. It's kind of a mystery in life. But when it was revealed, it was so powerful to me. And I thought, well, that's something I really want to share with other people.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure it will help so many people because that is a significant crisis that a lot of people have encountered. But the fact that you shifted is important. Now, as someone committed to continuous learning, what are you learning right now?
Well, as much as we need to have focus on what we are going to do, we need to have focus on what we're not going to do.
Say more.
That I think is even more important, honestly, especially now that I'm in my own business. As an entrepreneur, I don't know if you're anything like me, but my social media is working. Every person out there is marketing to me. But it's like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And then you look at that, and then that sounds really interesting. And so just getting clarity about what is my offering in the marketplace that's unique, that's based on my passion, my experience, and then what am I not going to do? And I'm so naturally collaborative. It's actually very fun for me because I'm like, well, I know a person who does that. And then I know a person who does this. And then all of a sudden we build this network of referral partners. But in businesses, it would be, that person's really good at that activity. Maybe we can do a little alliance here. They love doing that. I love doing this. And then, the team is stronger for it. So that would probably be the biggest lesson that I'm learning right now.
Ellen, I appreciate you sharing that. When I think of you, there are 3 things that come up for me. You're a highly curious person. You're always wanting to grow, and you're hard on yourself sometimes. And you have vision. And no matter what you go through, you really persevere. And one of the things that I know that is super, super important for leaders is self-care. We move forward, we have responsibilities, there's a lot on our plates. But if we don't practice self-care, all of that can crumble.
So I have a lot to say on the subject. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of my newest certifications
Mhm.
because it's so cool.
Okay.
And it helps with well-being. And it's about this idea of working in your strengths. There's something I'm sure many people have heard about StrengthsFinder or Clifton Strengths. Well, I combine that with a layer which is called core clarity. And so when you understand your top 5 strengths, imagine it's not skills. It's kind of how our brains are wired. When we work in our strengths on teams, 3 things happen simultaneously that are just amazing. I call it the triple win. People every day who work in their strengths say their well-being is increasing. They're not burnt out. They're doing what they are good at and enjoy doing. Can you imagine having fun at work? I mean, but fun at work doing work. I mean, yes, it's fun to have, fun at work with your teams and offsites and things like that. The second thing is productivity goes up. And the third thing is that profit goes up. All these go up at the same time. So I'm really leaning into that side of how to help leaders and individuals. Another thing is, I don't know if you've heard of the positive intelligence approach. And this was really eye-opening to me. In Core Clarity, the work that I was just describing, I
Mhm.
have 4 out of my top 5 are all in one color. And that color has me doing a lot of reflection and processing information. It was no accident. I was a forecasting manager at 2 Fortune 500 companies. I like to look a lot of data and see trends and all that. But the irony is that I always used to think I had to think my way out of situations that were causing me emotional challenges. And the positive intelligence has us lean into our somatic signals. Like, what is my body doing? And it's a shift, and it's using neuroscience, which I'm now learning about. And it's crazy. There's this one lady who teaches about how to learn. And I'm realizing I didn't know how to learn my whole life. And there's 2 parts of learning. There's the focus mode and the diffuse mode. And the diffuse mode is what we do when we go on vacation, take a shower, do a walk, do breathing, feel the ridges on our fingers. And those together mean that we're the most creative that we can be. So, yes, self-care comes in so many different ways. I just talked about 2 examples that I've personally been really leaning into.
So let's say I'm an organization listening to this. I'm curious about core clarity. How can I start this journey with you?
Well, if you're a leader and you're thinking about having teams do this, because it's amazing, they're 2 different 3/4 day workshops. But to start, if you want to understand it, then feel free to contact me on my website and I could do a debrief. I could have you do the Clifton Strengths, get your top 5, send them to me, and then I'll go through the 2 different reports you get from Core Clarity. They're completely proprietary to Core Clarity. And the way I describe this, because they're both amazing perspectives, what Clifton Strengths will say is this is how people experience you. And if
Hmm,
you think about that, it's sort of your brand within a company,
right.
right? But the next one is how you experience yourself, which
Ooh,
I always think know thyself is the place to start, even if you've been trying to ask that question for many decades.
right, right.
Keep asking. And the reason is that when I was in corporate doing IT work, when I was a full-on 100% project manager, I was constantly burnt out. But when I became a different role where all my curiosity, asking a million questions, using all the other experience I had unlimited energy. The 2 perspectives are very important. I always lean on starting with know thyself and happy to help anyone.
Super important. And it's interesting. It's about emotional intelligence. It's about not just knowledge, which is beautiful. Cognitive skills are great, but our guiding system, our operating system are our emotions. And we're often taught that that doesn't matter, especially in corporate. And so you're bringing something very important here. Thank you so much. So,
Thank you.
Ellen, when you reflect on leadership today, what are your biggest concerns and what gives you the most hope?
I hate to be like everyone else and talk about AI, but I'll bring this up. I've been leaning into and thinking more about this idea of knowledge workers.
Mhm.
And I put a post out on LinkedIn the other day. It was very interesting. People are thinking knowledge workers, people who get paid to be experts because of a certain skill set that they bring to a corporation is going to be going away with AI. And I don't think that's right at all. I think maybe the term knowledge workers might be wisdom workers. We had a couple fun ideas.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, but like, what do we do that's human? Because we're never going to not work in teams. We're never going to not need that human connection, that spark of ingenuity that, at least as far as I know, AI can't do. My generation, some of those examples were like the Walkman, or I don't know if you know about the Post-it notes for 3M. So they meant for 3M's glue to be super adhesive and it was sticky and never dried out. And what happened was the wife of the guy who invented it kept putting it in her music when she was in choir and kept moving it. So what was this? This was like a human inspiration that happened in a scenario that I don't think AI can create. So I think that innovation is really human. And so I'm leaning into this idea of let's use AI to automate the routine things, and then let's lean into the knowledge worker, the wisdom worker that we can be to add value at even a greater level.
Yes, there's so much creativity. You can't replicate that. The human touch. Love that.
Exactly.
Although I love AI too. All right.
Oh, I'm using it.
So, what gives you the most hope?
Lily, it's meeting people like you, meeting my fellow people who are running their businesses and adding value to society, bringing their years of decades of experience to bear, listening to the wisdom of younger generation. Like I'm an equal opportunity wisdom person. You know, I
Yes,
can tell
you
you
are. Can vouch
when
for
when I was a mom of a 3-year-old and my 3-year-old said something kind of amazing, I wrote that down.
love it.
And so I just think it's like the sky's the limit. When we lean into our strengths, when we honor that we're individuals that have wisdom that can come from somatic, come from cognitive, come from all these directions, come from our emotions, and really embrace that. And it's going to sound kind of funny, but I really want people to have fun at work.
Ellen, that's one of the things that I love so much about you, that you come into this work, you value those around you. You're open to learning always. And I know we have this funny thing where I've nicknamed you Footnote because we'll have a conversation and then something else comes to your mind and you go down that rabbit hole, but somehow you pull it all together. Your communication skills are on point, and these organizations that are leaning in would be just blessed with what you're bringing to the table. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for my moniker Footnote. We'll see. People will now listen in retrospect and see if I did that in this conversation.
All right. All right. So we have a surprise question from a previous guest. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Jennifer Nash wants to know, what have you had to unlearn in the last week?
Okay, so remember I mentioned that my dad was on the autism spectrum. Well,
Mhm.
growing up, my dad always asked me why. Now, later when I was in my career in supply chain, there's actually a technique called the 5 whys to try to get to root cause. But when you're in a family dynamic and you're being asked why, that puts me in a position of having to constantly explain and defend my reasoning.
And it's tiring. So,
Well, that got to be a pretty big groove in my neural network for my brain. So now fast forward years later, and I took Dr. Cialdini's certification, and I'm an influence coach, which is part of the reason why I wrote the book. And one of the research that came out was that when people were getting in line to make copies, they could get only a difference of 1%, 93% compliance to cut in line versus 94 if they use the word because in a sentence in this fashion. I would like to cut in line because I have 6 copies to make. Never in a million years would I have ever said that sentence because it's circular reasoning. Everybody was in line to make copies.
right.
But the word because becomes a shortcut in behavioral science and people accept the reason almost no matter what is said afterwards. So what did I have to unlearn? I had to unlearn that I could like something because I liked it.
Mm.
I didn't have to have a reason. And actually, my kids really helped me a lot because they both love things because they love them. There is no other reason.
Isn't that interesting?
I had to use science to unlogic me.
Period.
And when you think about the somatic pieces, right? If you love dancing, your body is telling you you love dancing. There's no logic in it. You're just having fun moving your feet. So there's a lot in life that doesn't have to have, reasons to it. And so that was the latest thing that I've unlearned.
It's interesting because when we're having fun, that's when we're learning the most. And that's what you bring to the table. Ellin, love it. All right. So, as a listener of this podcast, Ellin, what's a question you'd like a future leadership guest to respond to? Like, what are you curious about?
I guess I'm curious for those leaders, whether they're acknowledging the differences of their team members and thinking it's fair or unfair. Because most people, as managers, and I did it when I was a younger manager, thought kind of one fits all, and that it's unfair if I'm dealing with Mary different than I'm dealing with John. But Mary and John are different people. They have different strengths, they have different values, they have different interests. And so I'm super curious if management is thinking through that.
A very important question because fairness doesn't mean that everybody's treated equally. It's all about adding value to people, leaning in, being a great listener, all the things that we need to continue to up level.
And when you think about succession planning and high potential employees, leaders are going to want to spend more time with them, right? So this idea of fairness in the workplace, I think you have to have a different lens, and also a younger employee in their career might need more hands-on and a different kind of feedback than someone who's been around a while and you need to point in a direction and let them just go. I went on a footnote.
Of course you did. I love it. I love the question. It hasn't been asked before. Great stuff. Thank you. Now, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
Just how much I appreciate you and your show and what you're doing to get the conversation with leadership going, because it is so critical, I think, more than ever. Graduates from colleges today are having, I think, a bit more challenge than they ever used to. There used to be sort of the career ladder, and it's getting harder and harder to have those experiences in your career before you get your first job. And because of that, then there's a lot of human skills that people aren't necessarily getting the chance to learn in a real world situation. There's the squeeze play that's happening in businesses because it's hard to find talent, and there's AI and dislocating investment in technology. But at the end of the day, it's the people who will lean into and invest in their employees that are going to keep the loyal employees and are going to add the huge value. So I would just say that I have all the respect in the world for leaders. I went off the management track when I got cancer. So more power to you for being in that role in this day and age. And at the same time, it's so exciting what you can do to pave the way for the next generation.
The podcast is Master Leadership, Masters of Verb. And so we continue to grow in conversations like this. We continue to be open and we also continue to shift because things we believed back in the day isn't the same and we've changed and it's okay. And so I love what you're bringing to the table. Thank you so much. Once again, your website and the name of your book.
It's Ellin Sidell, Ellins as in Sam, Idell, The Influence Advantage.
Ellin, thank you so much for pouring into me and into our listeners. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.